On June 2, 2015, at 2:08 p.m., emergency services in Alton, Staffordshire, England, received a call about an accident at Alton Towers. When they arrived on the scene, they were shocked by the crowds and the chaos. The emergency vehicles couldn't reach the accident site due to the blockage caused by the crowds. Some people were behaving erratically, while others were ignoring the screams and pain coming from the Smiler roller coaster carriage. The firefighters' worst fear was not being able to reach the injured people. I've been posting lots of interesting and informative videos about roller coaster disasters on my channel. If you're interested in learning more about this subject, please subscribe to my channel. In a crowd meters above the ground, surrounded by support pillars, the emergency response crews were faced with a difficult and dangerous situation. It was too risky to attempt any type of evacuation. The firefighters who arrived on the scene were horrified by what they saw. All of the passengers were suffering from injuries. The rescue teams were unable to place one of their own on board the carriage. They immediately dispatched an emergency scaffold to help with the evacuation of the injured, but it took over 2 hours to transport and set it up. It was a technical rescue operation from hell, even for the experienced engineers at the park. They had difficulty identifying a safe, clear, and quick strategy to reach the stuck victims. The situation was further complicated by the fact that the coaster was in motion and the rescuers were not able to access the carriage until the ride was stopped. During the entire ordeal, emergency responders were working tirelessly to find quick solutions to the situation, as they were deeply concerned about the potential for internal bleeding and the possibility of death for those involved in the crash. It was a terrifying and frightening experience for not only the firefighters on the scene, but also for those who were injured in the crash. As the hours passed, emergency responders were made aware of the severity of the situation, and they received word that the hospital was treating the injured, and that both victims had unfortunately lost one leg each as a result of the accident. The news was devastating for all those involved, and it further emphasized the gravity of the situation and the critical need for swift action. The question of how a huge theme park could not have an automated mobile emergency scaffold to respond to such incidents was a valid one. The park management faced criticism for the delay in calling the emergency line, which took 17 minutes from the time of the crash. According to industry standards, the emergency call should have been made within 2 minutes of the crash, and the caller should have reported that the victims were located at least 20 feet above the ground. The media helicopter streaming the rescue on social media and TV was another factor that hindered the rescue. The captain responsible for the rescue had 21 years of experience and was frustrated by the volume of calls. It was clear that the park's emergency response plan was inadequate and had failed in this critical situation. His job was made even more difficult by it. Alton Towers Resort, a resort and theme park in Staffordshire, England, is very popular and enjoyable. It's located near Alton Village. Merlin Entertainments owns and operates it. On that fateful day, Vicky and her friends were excited to ride the Smiler, not knowing that a series of human errors and miscommunication would lead to a devastating accident. The ride's safety system had been manually overridden, causing 2 carriages to collide on the track. Vicky and several other riders were left with severe injuries, including amputations. The accident was a wake-up call for the theme park industry, highlighting the importance of proper maintenance and safety protocols. The park was fined £5 million for the incident, and Vicky and her friends were left to cope with the physical and emotional trauma of the accident. The Smiler was closed for months and underwent extensive renovations before reopening to the public. The incident serves as a reminder that safety should always be a top priority, even in the midst of thrilling fun. The park was busting with activity, with a larger than anticipated crowd in attendance, which prompted the engineers overseeing the Huge Smile ride to make a last-minute decision to add an additional carriage to the ride. Despite the usual safety limit of 4 carriages, the engineers also sent an empty carriage out to test wind conditions due to the unusually strong winds that were present that day. Unfortunately, the ride supervisor had made the decision to add a 5th carriage filled with 16 passengers without informing the engineers, which ultimately led to a tragic accident. The test carriage, which had been sent out to assess the wind conditions, stalled at a height of 21 feet in the air due to the high winds, while the fifth carriage, loaded with passengers, was still in motion and traveling at a high speed. Passengers on the ride screamed in terror and braced for impact as they raced towards the stalled carriage at 50 miles per hour. Many survivors reported feeling certain that they would die in the crash, with their bodies left beyond recognition. Vicky Balch was in the front row of the doomed carriage, considered the most desirable seat at the time of the collision. The crash occurred at 1:51 p.m. and was a traumatic and violent event that shocked nearby onlookers who were unable to prevent it. The noise was deafening. Without the safety belts and bars in place, passengers would have been thrown headfirst to their deaths. Vicky closed her eyes, prepared to die, as she felt the front of the carriage press against her legs and her organs being jolted. Ironically, the ride was designed to automatically stop when a carriage stopped, but the engineers had bypassed the safety feature and were unaware that there was still a fifth carriage on the track. As passengers came to the realization that they had survived the crash, the crowd below rushed to check on them. This was the second instance of miscommunication. The human body can sometimes convince us that we aren't hurt after a crash due to the release of adrenaline. This is why most of the 16 passengers in the carriage believed they were fine and didn't immediately call for emergency services. However, even though they appeared unharmed, they soon began to experience inexplicable pain. Vicky Balch noticed her leg was rapidly swelling and she couldn't move it. The doctors were forced to amputate Vicky Balch's leg a few hours later. Everything became an absolute nightmare and her life was forever changed. She knew it was over. She was a disfigured, undesirable girl who had few choices in her life. Her family and friends supported her throughout a long and difficult journey, healing and treatment. Later, she was aided by Dino, her newfound love. A theme park usually goes quiet after such an accident. The park quickly took responsibility for the accident by releasing only statements and avoiding all media attention, even going so far as to plead guilty to the subsequent charges before the court proceedings began. This was the first time that a theme park had made such an admission. They were fined approximately $7 million, and they also paid an undisclosed sum of money to the injured. Vicky wasn't the only victim of the accident. Another girl had to go through the same thing, and her leg was also amputated. Both girls received multi-million-dollar compensation packages as part of an out-of-court settlement. Vicky is now dependent on her prosthetic limb for all of her needs. Therapy and treatment were provided for her entire life. This horror story ends with a wedding, unlike many others. Vicky Balch married Dino Morciocchi 6 years later. It was a beautiful and emotional ceremony. They had originally planned to tie their knot in September in Florence, Italy. However, due to the COVID pandemic, they were forced to postpone. Vicky gave birth to Venecio in December 2021 by emergency C-section. She and her husband also own a successful pizza shop. What do you think? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this next one. Thanks for watching.